The wind howled across the barren stretch of land, rattling the thin walls of the old cabin like a warning. Inside, the air was thick with smoke from the dying fire and the desperate wail of a newborn baby. The man sitting beside the hearth didn't stir for a long time. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, staring into the orange glow that was fading with every minute. The baby's cries cut through him, but he felt too numb, too beaten, to do anything but listen. The small figure on the bed squirmed under a patchwork blanket. Her face blotchy, her fists clenched as she cried again for the mother who would never come. The rancher, Eli Turner, pressed his rough palms to his face, his beard scraping against his hands. He'd faced storms that tore down fences, droughts that took his cattle, and winters that nearly froze the blood in his veins. But he had never felt this, helpless in his life. Only 3 days had passed since he buried her, Mary. His Mary. The fever had come like a thief in the night, leaving her sweating and delirious, whispering his name one last time before her hand went still in his. She hadn't even had time to say goodbye to their daughter. Eli had dug the grave himself behind the house, where the cottonwood trees met the rise of the hill. His hands had blistered and bled, the shovel heavy as lead, but he hadn't felt it. He remembered the sound of the dirt hitting the wooden box, dull and final. He remembered the silence afterward, the kind that seemed to suck the breath out of the air. Now the silence was broken only by the sound of his baby's cries. He rose with effort, his body stiff, his shoulders slumped like a man carrying a burden too big for one soul. He went to the cradle, just a wooden box he had padded with an old blanket, and looked down. Her tiny face was contorted, her mouth open, her lungs strong in their protest. She was hungry again. Always hungry? Shh! It's all right, sweetheart, he muttered hoarsely, though the words caught in his throat. Pa's here. He picked her up awkwardly, the way a man might handle something breakable and sacred. Her skin was so soft it made his hands feel clumsy. Her weight so light it made his heart ache. He had tried everything he could think of. Milk from a cow, a bit of warm water, even honey once. But nothing seemed to work. The little one would suck for a few moments, then cry harder, her belly still empty. He sank back into his chair by the fire, cradling her against his chest. The warmth of her small body pressed against his heart, and for a moment he felt something shift deep inside him. A flicker of determination, of desperate love. But then the fear came rushing back. He didn't know how to keep her alive. The fire crackled weakly, casting shadows across the bare wooden floor. The smell of smoke mingled with the faint sourness of spoiled milk. Outside, the coyotes had begun to call, their mournful howls echoing across the plains. Eli stared at the cradle, at the tiny bundle in his arms, and felt smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. He rose, pacing the room. His boots thudded softly on the planks. "Don't cry, baby girl," he murmured, though she did, her sobs cutting sharper each time. He tried to hum the way Mary used to, some tune about rivers and rain, but his voice broke. He ended up whispering instead. Hours seemed to pass like that, the crying, the pacing, the whispers to a child too young to know what was being said. His eyes stung, his head throbbed. He hadn't eaten since dawn. The exhaustion pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't throw off. He sank to his knees beside the cradle and bowed his head. "Lord," he whispered, his voice breaking in the stillness, "I can fix fences, I can break a horse, but I can't fix this. I don't know what to do. I can't lose her too." He stayed there, silent. The only sound, the baby's soft whimpers and the faint wind outside. It was almost dark when the knock came. Eli froze, his head lifting slowly, his ears straining. He thought at first it was the wind, or maybe just his imagination. But then it came again, 3 firm knocks, steady and sure. He blinked, confusion washing over him. There wasn't a soul for miles who would come calling this time of day. He set the baby carefully in the cradle and crossed the room, every step slow, his heart pounding. When he opened the door, the cold wind rushed in, and with it the faint scent of soap and wildflowers. A young woman stood on the porch. Her dress was plain, travel-stained, her dark hair braided down her back. Her cheeks were red from the cold, but her eyes were warm. She held her shawl tight around her shoulders, but there was something steady in her stance, something strong. "Mr. Turner?" she asked softly. He nodded, still trying to find his voice. "Who are you?" "My name's Clara," she said. "I came from the Granger place. I heard about your wife." Her voice softened on the last word. She looked past him, toward the sound of the crying. "And your baby." Eli's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Ain't got much company out this way." She took a small breath, then spoke in a tone that trembled between courage and compassion. "Sir, I nursed my sister's child for a time. My milk's still good. If you'll let me," she swallowed hard, glancing down. "If you'll let me, I can feed her. She won't last much longer without." Eli just stood there, the cold air biting at his skin, the fire flickering behind him, his baby crying louder now, as if sensing what was being offered. He wanted to speak, to thank her, to say something, but all that came out was a rough whisper. "You do that?" "I would," Clara said simply. "For her. For your wife." Something in her voice, the honesty, the kindness, cut through the fog that had wrapped around his heart for days. He stepped aside slowly, motioning her in. "Come in," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please." Clara stepped into the cabin, the light catching her face. She moved toward the cradle with quiet assurance, like someone who had done this before. The baby's cries softened almost instantly, as if she could sense salvation in the air. The first rays of morning sunlight crept across the plains, touching the edge of the old Turner ranch with a golden hue. Inside, the cabin was filled with the soft crackle of firewood and the sound of steady, gentle breathing, both the baby's and the woman's. Clara sat in the rocker near the window, her shawl draped around her shoulders, her dark hair undone now, falling in loose waves. The baby, finally full and content, rested against her chest. Tiny fingers curled against the fabric of her dress. Eli stood a few steps away, his broad frame tense, as though afraid to disturb the peace that had returned to the house. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was calm, no wailing, no hopeless pacing, just the sound of life settling back into rhythm. Clara looked up at him, her expression soft but unreadable. "She's a strong one," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Took to nursing right away. She must have been starving." Eli nodded slowly. He couldn't quite meet her gaze. His throat tightened with gratitude and something else he didn't have words for. "I don't know how to thank you," he said finally, his voice rough with exhaustion. "You don't have to," she replied simply. "A hungry child's got no time to wait for thanks." The way she said it made him look at her then, really look. Her face wasn't delicate like Mary's had been. It was strong, sun-touched, the kind of face that had known hard work and long days. But there was something steady in her eyes, something that had been missing from his world since the day he lost his wife, hope. He turned away, ashamed of how long he'd gone without hope at all. Clara adjusted the baby in her arms and began to hum softly. A tune so gentle it seemed to weave through the air like a prayer. Eli recognized it after a while. Mary used to hum it when she cooked, a lullaby from her childhood. The sound hit him like a soft blow to the chest. He moved to the window and stared out at the hills, the sun now climbing higher. After a few minutes, Clara spoke again. "I didn't mean to intrude last night. I just couldn't sleep knowing there was a baby here who might not make it." "You did right," he said gruffly. "She wouldn't have lasted another night." He turned back toward her, his eyes softening. "You saved her." Clara looked down at the little one, now asleep. "No, Mr. Turner, I think she saved me." He frowned slightly, not understanding, but didn't press. There was something in her tone that spoke of sorrow, the kind a person carried quietly. He didn't ask. He'd learned that some wounds healed best in silence. As the day wore on, Clara stayed. She helped tidy the place, washed the baby's small clothes, even stirred a pot of broth over the fire. Eli watched her work, the ease of her movements reminding him what it was like to have warmth in a home. She spoke little, but her silence was comfortable. When she finally prepared to leave that afternoon, Eli followed her to the porch. The wind had died down, leaving only the faint rustle of grass across the fields. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked. Clara hesitated. "I was staying with my cousin, the Grangers, but they've got too many mouths to feed. I was just looking for work, housekeeping maybe." Eli shifted uncomfortably, his hat twisting in his hands. He didn't like the thought of her walking away, not after what she'd done, and not with the way his cabin had felt less lonely in the few hours she'd been there. "You can stay here," he said abruptly. "Clara,